Lord, give us grace to know what we ought to do as your servants. Amen.
Amen.
I hope the addition of those few verses at the beginning of the chapter helped as we wonder, why are the disciples suddenly asking, increase my faith? I think it's because Jesus told them, you have to forgive. You have to forgive if somebody has broken your relationship or your community and wants to be restored. You have to forgive them, even if they do it 7 times a day. Now, I have a feeling that most of us who have experienced repeat offenders, if you will, in our lives, usually that's somebody who's related to us. Am I wrong? The people who know how to hurt us most and who then come back expecting to be forgiven or expected to be welcomed home are often the ones who have done it more than once. And Jesus says you have to give them a chance. And the apostles, hearing this, may have recalled the times when their own number have messed up in their midst. And we've heard their stories, right? Sometimes, well, let's see, James and John wanted to get first place in the kingdom of heaven, to sit at Jesus' left and right hands, and then the other disciples overheard them like, what are you doing? We were thinking of that. We were thinking of that too. And they had to forgive one another, or else the whole operation was going to collapse before they even got started, right? You need to forgive if the person wants to be restored. Now, you don't necessarily have to restore a relationship if that person is not willing to change what they've been up to, right? If the same person keeps offending 7 times a day, they may be having a problem with willpower or with telling the truth about do they plan to actually change. Because much of what Jesus has to say is all about the choices we make and the changes we make in our lives. I wonder if this is the sound teaching that St. Paul, or someone writing in St. Paul's name, because this letter seems to be a little bit later than when Paul was around, but in the advice given to Timothy, a new young leader in the church, what do you suppose the hardest teaching was that his mentor wants him to remember? I'm guessing that perhaps the message of forgiveness, even back then, was hardest to recall. Because Paul tells Timothy in other occasions, you're having hard times, you'll be suffering like I have, hang in there, remember the teachings. And so much of Jesus' teachings were about forgiveness and about keeping the community together again. On Friday evening, just 2 days ago, I was blessed to be in the presence of a real living saint of the churches, plural, because she's Roman Catholic in origin, though I'm not sure the Pope would probably always bless what she says. But Sister Joan Chittister, she's from Erie, Pennsylvania, near where I used to live. She's written many books, but she's in her 80s now. She is still full of fire she never lost her activism of the 60s, 70s, and now she's out there still preaching the word. And she came and spoke at Christ Church, Episcopal Church at Cranbrook. And she had some words for us, I'll tell you. And she said, this is what the most that I really took out of it. She said, what did you learn about Jesus when you were a child? And what do most of your elders probably tell you to know about Jesus? Isn't it that Jesus wants you to be nice? Jesus was nice, and he wants the church to be nice and be kind to one another. And Jesus healed people who wanted to come back and wanted everybody to be nice to them. Isn't that what you learned? And we were all like, yeah, that's probably what we learned. That's probably among the first things that young Timothy learned from his grandmother Lois and his mother Eunice. How neat that they are remembered, the teachers of their young grandson or son. But she said there's a whole other half to Jesus that the church has tended to gloss over, especially certain churches, which is that Jesus also talked a whole lot about justice. And justice is not always nice. And she said, we've gotten just a little too preoccupied with being nice to everybody and not making any waves. And as many of the churches, and I'd have to say the Episcopal Church is generally one of these, at the expense of proclaiming things have to change and it might not feel nice. And she kind of scolded us, especially us who are preachers, for only preaching the nice without the justice half of Jesus' message. And so it got me thinking a bit. It got me thinking, what are the messages we pass down from generation to generation? Which are the ones that speak to our generation, and which are the ones we kind of let fall by the wayside from time to time? Which are the ones that are sound teaching that Timothy is recommended to hang on to? And which are ones that sometimes we make in our own image, or we kind of slack on in order to let people off the hook because we don't want them to get upset at church? Well, I don't want to tick everybody off at church. That's not a very good pastoral role, but sometimes we need to be nudged and to be reminded of the messages that Jesus also said about justice and about changing our presuppositions, about changing the idea that we can just stay fine and comfortable in our own selfish ways and sometimes not get a little poke, a little kick in the behind. Because as I think about the gospel messages and the people Jesus met on the road, can you think of anybody he didn't tell to change? Was there anyone he said, oh, you are just fine the way you are. You don't have to change a thing. You can do exactly everything you like to do right now. Did he ever tell that to anybody? I cannot think of a single person he did not encourage to do something a little different in their life. I mean, we can start with the fishermen, right? Come follow me. Leave the nets. Leave your parents who are hollering at you from behind in the village. Get back here. No, I've got something else to do, Mom, Dad. He said to the tax collectors who came to listen to him, stop trying to defraud people. Stop trying to skim off the top. Be honest. Amend your ways. And then come follow me if you want. He told people who wanted to go back home and do what they had left waiting for them at home. Jesus said, don't say you're going to follow me and turn around. That isn't how it works. And he told people, even those whom he healed, are you ready to be a different person now in your society? You're used to being a beggar, a leper, a cripple. Are you ready to be a different person now and be restored into your full self? Jesus' words of justice were always filled with the opportunity for improvement, for hope, for a new community. But he was still pretty clear that people needed to take better care of each other and of the world. We go right back to caring for creation. That was one of Sister Joan Chittister's big themes on Friday night. How have we let the world become such a polluted, awful mess for the next generations? How have we forgotten the succeeding generations and think that it is just fine for us to do whatever we want to the land and to the waters and to the air? How have we let this happen? And she said, we need a little more prophetic preaching about Jesus' message around selfishness and greed. How have we let corporate profits be just hoarded by a few and not spread out among all the workers that brought them in? How have we allowed government to get so caught up in narcissism and not in justice for everybody? Preachers, she said, you need to do a better job. And I thought, yeah, maybe you're right. But I don't want to tick off everybody in my pews or they might not ever come back. So gently, we remember the teaching of the church. and of our parents and grandparents, perhaps. That treating people well, treating people like brothers and sisters, means truly treating them as you'd want to be treated yourself. That caring for the earth means more than your own lawn and spraying it with pesticides so it looks good. It means caring for everybody's lawn, everybody's world, even the people way downstream who are going to get those pesticides. Caring for what we have is not truly godly until we look past ourselves. It doesn't have to be onerous, a lot. Maybe for some people it is, but it can be regular in how we think about our relationship with God and with one another and with our country and with our politicians who are now all wanting to be elected, right? Let's do some investigating. Let's do some investigating. Or the companies that want us to buy their stock and their products. Let's do some investigating. You can find these pieces of information in the darndest places. You can read the newspaper. You can go online. Facebook had a little ad that came up for me. Do you like your laundry detergent? And I thought, huh. And I read this ad a little further, and it was a woman who said, I started reading the ingredients on the laundry detergent and found out there's all sorts of stuff. They say they're free and clear, but read the label. They might not be free and clear of stuff you don't want to go in the water supply. Oh. Being reminded of Jesus' full message is something that will happen from time to time in the lectionary. And from time to time when we hear it, we'll say, Lord, could you please increase my faith because there's no way I can do all this. But Jesus said, these are the basics. And don't expect to be patted on the back and handed a medal and called a hero for doing the basics. That's that second half, the kind of cringy part about slaves. That's been misused all over the place, but I think he's saying, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing because of what I tell you, don't then expect somebody to wait on you and give you a medal. Do what you're supposed to do. Care for one another. Care for the earth. Care for what is important for the next generation, not just your own. And then you're on the right track. May we know the strength and the presence of God to remember those things that we ought to have done and confess it when we don't, and know that each day is a new day and a new opportunity. In the name of Christ, who sends us to do the right thing. Amen. Amen.